This is the third video in the User Management System series. In this video, we will become familiar with the model and its support file, database.php. In the model view control pattern of application development, the model is responsible for all data interactions with the database server. In order for it to do so, it must have a connection to the database server. While there are many ways to connect to the database, we will store the connection in a support file named database.php, which is stored in the support folder. Open the database.php file. We will use the PDO PHP data object connection methodology for our connection and database interactions. The benefit of this method is that it allows us to use a common process with every supported database, rather than having to change our process every time we need to interact with a new database type, such as MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle, or any of the others. You will see on line 2 that we have declared the type of database as MySQL, followed by the name of the server, localhost, and the name of the database, demos. You will need to make sure that the server and database names match your server and database names. If you followed the directions in the first video, these values should be correct. On the next two lines, the name of the proxy user and the password for the proxy user are needed. The proxy user and password were created at the same time as the database in video 1. My proxy user is demo_user with a password of demo user. I will enter them in their respective locations. Lines 6 through 12 then attempt to create a new PDO connection, which happens on line 7, and assign it to the variable $db. However, if the creation fails, an exception is thrown and caught on line 8. As a result, the database error page is sent to the browser, where the site visitor is informed that an error occurred. Start your local web and database servers. Run the database.php file in the browser. If the page returned is blank, then the connection is successful. If the database error page is returned, go back and check the values for the database server, database name, proxy user, and password using the phpMyAdmin tool in your local environment. Once the database.php page is working, save and close it. Open the model.php page. As with the controller, index.php, the model is heavily commented to guide and suggest its development. Because the functions within the model must interact with the database and database server, the database connection must be included into the model's scope. This is done on line 14 using a require once statement. Because the model is responsible for interacting with the database, each of these interactions can be done using a function. The first of the functions has been written and is shown on lines 17 through 31. Each function should describe what it does, and if it requires data from the outside of the function to be sent to the function, these are passed into the function as parameters. In this function, there are 4 such parameters: first name, last name, email, and password. Each of these values are intended to be stored into the user's table in the demos database. A function's scope begins and ends with the left and right curly braces, found on lines 17 and 30 respectively. In order for the function to gain access to the database connection, the $db variable from the database.php file is brought into the function's scope using the global $db semicolon statement on line 18. In order to be both efficient and more secure, we are using prepared statements. These statements have a common format to follow. First, write the SQL to be used. Second, attempt to create the prepared statement. Third, replace named placeholders with the variable that holds the actual value, if named placeholders were used in the SQL statement. Fourth, execute the SQL query. 5, fetch data from the database, if the SQL query is a select. 6, test if the query worked. 7, close the connection to the server. And 8, return the result of the interaction to the controller. As you can see, the SQL query is written on line 20. The query uses 4 named placeholders, one each for the first name, last name, email, and password values. The named placeholder temporarily holds the location for the actual value that will be inserted later in the prepared statement. Line 21 is where the database connection object's method, prepare, is called, and the SQL query is sent as a parameter to the database server. The syntax of the query is checked, and if successful, a new prepared statement object is created named statement. Lines 22 through 25 then use the statement's bind value method to replace the named placeholders with the values from the actual variables. On line 26, the execute method is run to send the now complete query to the database to be executed. When an insert, update, or delete query is run in the database successfully, one or more rows will change. On line 27, the database is asked to report back the number of rows that were changed as a result of the query. Using the row count method of the statement object, the database server sends the number back and it is stored in the result variable. The database connection is then closed on line 28. Finally, the value of the result variable is returned to wherever the function was called, which will be in the controller. You will find comments on lines 32 and 36 indicating 2 additional functions that will be written in later videos. Save the model and close it. Save and close the database.php file as well if it is still open. In the next video, we will examine the database_error.php and registration.php pages in the Views folder.